please introduce yourself? You
Um,
don't have to say your last name, just give me a first name.
my name is Rowyn, and I'm 17 and in grade 12.
And I don't think, because I've checked this out, we don't have to worry too much about making sure you got your guardian's permission to be on YouTube. So,
Yeah, I think you can have a YouTube account like of your own volition at like 14 or something.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's all about content and,
Yeah.
this is pretty innocuous stuff.
hmm
So, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
It's the weekend. It's a long weekend.
Yes?
I.
Every weekend is a long weekend.
It is, but it's like an extra long weekend, so it's like 4 days.
Oh!
Yeah, because it was the end of term on Thursday, so I've been quite busy.
Oh.
And I have to get an essay that I thought I had more time on. I have to get it like done basically by tomorrow night to
Oh,
hand
is that
it
right?
in so my teacher can do report cards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Are you feeling good about getting it in on time?
I can hand it in and get at least a B confidently by tonight.
Oh.
But if I want to hand in a product I actually care and think I did a good job on, it's going to take some work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what do you think the route is going to be that you take?
For doing that,
Yeah. Are
actually
you
sitting
going for the
down-
B or are you going higher?
I'm going higher, but
Okay.
I'll get myself to a B by tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I don't have enough quotes in my thing, and I'm
Oh.
technically in a grade 11 class, but I'm doing like grade 12 work
Okay.
because grade 11 work is boring. Um, so instead of doing like a normal essay, I'm doing a comparative essay between two books.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What are the books?
The German Girl by Cuban man, I forget his name.
Okay.
And Night
That's not a good
by
start.
Elie Wiesel. Yeah. Yeah. The German Girl is fiction, and since I'd already read Night, I decided to like read another book to make it more interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, so it's an essay about whether like which one is more effective storytelling for talking about something like the Holocaust.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I have to do some like background research and stuff to get a better product.
Cool.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun.
Product. That's
Product.
an interesting way to put it.
Yeah. Well, I think I get that from an art background.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Oh,
like
okay.
calling stuff that I make a product.
Okay. Cool.
Do a lot of art.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. Well, it sounds like you're kind of pretty well rounded in, your educational goals, so it's always good. That way it keeps you diversified, right? And,
Like this semester I have a lot of social sciences and stuff. Like I'm in Civ 12 and technically 2 English classes and an art class.
oh, okay.
But next semester I have psychology, biology, which is now physiology 12, and chem 12.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And despair, because it's 3 sciences.
Nice. Good for you.
Yeah.
So,
Pretty fun.
do you find them challenging? Do you find them sort of, you're very competent and comfortable with them?
I've never found school super challenging with the actual schoolwork.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my issue with school is like the getting there, because I have like mental health issues, so it's hard
Okay.
sometimes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So it's not going to be challenging to like do the work. It's going to be challenging to like manage my time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that'll be
I
fun.
think that's the same with everyone. I'm a
Yeah.
a terrible procrastinator. No, actually, I'm a good procrastinator, I should
I'm
say.
excellent at it.
I'm
I just
excellent
do it
at
a lot.
Right on.
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk about a belief that you have, and not so much what it is, though that's important, but certainly the means by which you get to holding a belief and the justifications you use. So is there a belief that you have in mind that you'd like to talk about? Something that, that really helps you,
Yeah.
it informs your worldview.
Knowledge is power.
Okay,
That's a big
knowledge
one.
is power, yeah.
I think that the thing that you should strive for in life the most is to make informed decisions.
Okay.
And that having more information about the situation gives you more power about the situation. So
Okay.
if you have the most information you can, you have the most power.
Okay. So, so how would you formulate that into a belief statement? What, knowledge is power. Okay. How do you get knowledge?
You get knowledge by investigating, doing research, trying to see things from different people's perspectives, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. But that leads to a bit of an interesting thing of how do you know it's true?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
how do you know it's true?
how do you know it's true? At school, at least, we're taught to trust experts and to, we're kind of taught now, digital literacy, which is figuring out whether or not a source is reliable. Just
Okay.
looking at stuff like if they put their name on it, if they have any qualifications, if it's recent, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So checking sources. But also if it stands up to reason, then it's more trustworthy.
Okay.
If it isn't contradictory,
So when you say stands up to reason,
stands up to reason. Yeah.
Okay,
So
what does that
that's
mean?
more about an argument.
okay.
So if someone's trying to make you believe something that they're believing,
Mm-hmm.
then checking on whether or not their argument actually makes sense. If you were to break it down into terms that they're not, if you were to explain it in your own words, does it still make sense?
Okay. So, are you familiar with syllogisms?
I might be, but maybe not by that word.
Okay. Well, it's the format of a logical argument.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a premise, another premise, and those two premises lead to a conclusion. That's the typical structure of a syllogism. So, the sky is blue. Or I can see blue. Therefore, one thing leads to another. Or I'm having a hard time explaining this. But do you know what I mean?
So a bad syllogism in that case would be the sky is blue, therefore flowers don't exist. That's a bad one, or what are you trying to
yeah,
say?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I had a better example of that, but it's just trying to draw it out to my mind. But it's the format of an argument, right? So when a person makes a claim, do you believe that it is their burden of proof to demonstrate that the claim?
Yeah. So basically, yes, I do believe that if someone makes a claim, especially if it's a claim leading to an action that they want me to take, I do think that they have to convince me that that is the right thing, and that the burden of proof falls on them. So they can't just make unsubstantiated claims and expect you to prove yourself innocent or something. They have to prove it. Yeah.
Right. So what does your understanding say of the scientific method as it applies to your knowledge, to gaining knowledge, reliable knowledge?
Reliable knowledge has to stand up to objective testing.
Okay.
In the scientific method. So if a third party were to test using your method, would they find the same conclusion? There's a lot of talk of scientific consensus, which is if more than one person looks at it and they all agree.
Right.
And if a minority of people think something that's the scientific consensus, then why is that?
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing would apply to a belief, but that I think that can also lead to bias, because if a lot of people believe something, more people talk about it, and more people convince someone of something.
Okay, so
You have
sort of
to
like
actually
confirmation
look at it.
bias?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Are there instances where, and this goes back to my idea of the syllogism, are there arguments that are well formed that lead to bad conclusions?
Yeah.
So how would you test that?
Well, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and she's really into philosophy. So
Okay.
she was talking to me, trying to dissect my beliefs, basically.
Okay.
So she would ask me something, and then I would give an answer, and she'd be like, "How do you know?" And I would answer, and eventually we all get down to societal bias.
Okay.
It's what she was testing on me.
Okay.
Eventually, how you know is just whether or not you believe it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So, can you
Yeah.
reframe that?
I don't. It's not it's not scientific, and it probably isn't like strong philosophy, but it is like how people act. Which is that like if it like appeals to them, they'll believe it.
Okay.
And that's how we basically decide if things are true in our day-to-day lives.
Is that
And if you want it to be true. But I don't think that's how things are like truly true.
Okay.
But I think it's like almost impossible to prove something completely true from everyone's perspective because things change.
okay? And why is that?
Everyone lives in their own little world in their head.
Okay.
Basically.
But are some things so objectively true?
So we were talking earlier about the sky being blue.
Yes.
There are people who don't see blue.
Right.
The sky isn't blue to them.
Right.
So it can't be objectively true. It has a quality that can be measured as blue, which is like the wavelength of the light. So that's one way that we can be like it's objectively true because it has this.
Mm-hmm.
But color is an experience, and because it's an experience, it can be subjective. So
Okay.
the sky is blue can't be an objective statement.
It can't be. Is that what you said?
I don't think it can be because it doesn't apply to everyone.
Because you're making a distinction between the experience of blue and the
the
physics
the
of blue.
quality of having a wavelength that we categorize as blue.
Okay.
Yeah. Because there's wavelengths that we don't, like that other people experience as different things. There's, again, I can't remember her name. There's one English woman, and she has 4 cones in her eyes, and she sees colors that people don't see. So she has a completely different experience of color and might not see the sky as blue. But she can't explain what her colors are because we can't see them.
Right.
Right.
So, but there again, there's still is there still a difference between what we're maybe trying to find out?
Mm-hmm.
Like if no, this is interesting. I mean, so trying to determine what is true. Is there a way to determine what is true independent of our experience of it?
I'm not sure if there is. I don't really think so. Because I don't think that even if there was a way, I'm not sure if it would really matter.
Oh?
Because if there was a way to do that, we'd still be experiencing it.
Well,
and it would still come down to like people's
Okay.
experiences and what they do with that information after, which is still
Right.
an experience.
right. What about? Well, let's pick something that is not dependent on, gravity, for
Gravity.
instance. The sense that we're all standing on something. Is that an objective reality outside of our experience of it?
Well, there is a thing that is gravity. There's the force that is gravity, and then there's the experience of gravity.
Right.
So basically everyone experiences gravity, but someone who's like in a plane going zero and like experiencing 0G,
Sure.
or like in the space station, they're not experiencing gravity, but gravity still exists.
Well, they're experiencing gravity, but
They're experiencing
different.
gravity in a different way.
Right.
But they, from their own perspective, they would say, I'm in zero gravity.
Right. But do people make choices about how they're going to deal with gravity based on their experience of it or based on the objective reality of it?
How they experience it.
Oh?
Yeah.
So
if
is that
you're
how
in-
we
if-
built a spaceship to go into orbit?
So I think that you were talking about like scientifically how we deal with gravity. I'm talking about like day to day. So like we make based on whether or not we perceive gravity, like people who have vertigo and stuff, like they
Right.
walk different. Or like someone who's jumping experiences gravity slightly different than someone who isn't.
Okay.
So that's a way of dealing with gravity, and people can have like a warped perception of gravity because of like other things, such as vertigo, but like other things as well. Where the way that you react to gravity, so you deal with gravity, is different than what gravity like means on paper.
Right.
Right.
So in terms of trying to discover those things that are true, how do we develop a reliable method by which our experience then, which is variable and can differ from person to person, is not as significant a factor as the sort of objective reality of gravity that we all must work with, and sort of, I mean, because anybody that walks off a 10-story building will experience gravity, whether or not their personal experience of it
Is the same
is matching
as someone
somebody
who's walking
else's.
on the ground.
Right. Yeah. So, and I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out is, you know, how do we get past the experiential truths of our existence to the objective truths? How do we figure out what is the reliable method to truth independent of our experience of it?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a satisfactory answer for that.
Well, I mean, this is a thing to discover, right? I mean, you know, maybe
I said
another
before,
question
I'm
is:
not-
is it important to?
Is it important to find an objective outside of an experience?
Right.
Well, what that does is level the playing field for when we're talking about it. So that's what science does. Because science needs to have a lot of people who have different experiences talking about the same thing.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure that's what math is. That like we're putting like symbols to an actual thing that exists.
Right.
And we're using that as like, okay, let's pretend that like none of these other factors exist. What's it supposed to do? So like in calculations of math, that's just basically the most objective, that we can get is they negate a bunch of factors because it's like you can't calculate it. So like, yeah. So to make something an objective, if you think that an objective is something that can't be disputed, then I think you would have to eliminate a lot of factors and just talk about the thing that you're talking about in very, very, very clearly defined language.
So, so eliminating, what would you be eliminating?
Okay, so for example, when I was still doing physics and science, when we would be trying to calculate velocity, how fast is something supposed to go, we would eliminate the factor of air resistance.
Okay.
Because what's it supposed to be doing? And we would have a lot of things, and we would define like what each symbol means. We would define like, the speed, all that. And like it was standing completely still and had no energy, and you added energy, and what does it do?
Right.
And like I think we also eliminated the factor of like whether or not it made sound when it did. That would eliminate some of the energy. So it was just like all the energy goes from this thing to this thing. How long does it go? So we would eliminate a lot of factors that if you were to really take an object and punch it, a lot of other things would happen to make that ball slow down much faster than the math would suggest.
Right. So what are you trying to test there?
What you're trying to test there is
What is the idea you're testing?
I'm trying to figure out a way to explain the relationship between objectivity and experience.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting this right, so experience would be those extraneous factors that are not germane to the question, the point
So
you're actually trying to figure out.
If in the math I was talking about earlier, the question at hand that you're trying to objectively test is how far does the ball go if I punch it with this amount of force? You have to, or how far should the ball go if I punch it with this amount of force? You eliminate some experiential factors.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
in actual experience, if you punch the ball, other things might happen than what you expected.
Okay.
Because experience can't be so clearly defined as it is on math and paper. And people in the world do weird things sometimes that you don't always expect.
Well, it's of course interesting, yeah. So, again, how do we, how can we be sure that the methods that we're using to determine the objective reality of something are getting us there?
I'm not.
So maybe like you've heard about certainly falsifiability, right?
Yeah.
So when you make a hypothesis, you actually try to falsify it and find ways to disprove whatever the claim is. is that something you're familiar with that you
Yes.
use?
I'm not sure if I use it in my everyday to-day life and like every interaction, but that is something I'm familiar with and have used. Okay, so like I'm quite anxious. I have an anxiety disorder. So my brain comes up with like scary things that are like, oh my gosh, what if that happened? So I'm like statistically or like in my actual experience of my day-to-day life, that rarely ever happens, and it hasn't happened to me. So I do like falsify claims that my brain makes
Okay.
as a way of like functioning. But like I don't do that with every interaction that someone has when they like say something and I try to prove them false.
No, of
Yeah.
course, and certainly I wouldn't.
Yeah.
That's not. I don't think that's what I'm trying to get at.
But like about beliefs then?
Yeah. About beliefs, exactly. Like, for instance, some people believe in a god, right, or believe in astrology or whatever. Now, those claims, you can make those claims, and there should be a way to determine whether or not the claim is true by trying to falsify it.
Yeah. That,
Like, is there
interesting. I don't
is there a
think that
belief
there's
you
an-
used to hold?
Yes, I used to be more religious than I am. I'm
Okay.
very. I use the term atheistic pagan.
Okay.
So I
Okay.
was pagan. I like believed in like deities.
And not necessarily the one Christian God.
Definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah, like
So
Mother Earth.
more
and, like,
naturalistic.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, gotcha.
And now I don't believe in any intelligent creator or
Okay.
any like entity that's willfully doing anything.
Okay.
But I still use the term like pagan because I still do some of the practices.
Okay.
Not because I think they'll work, but because they make me feel better.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So it's like I still practice it because it's like a thing that I like to do instead of thinking it'll 100% actually work. And when I refer to like my gods, it's more like metaphorical.
Okay.
So like there
Oh,
are
I let's unpack that. Yeah.
there
So
are forces out there
Okay.
that people subscribe the name God to.
sure.
So things happen, natural disasters, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, that was God. I don't think that it is God. I don't think that a thing decided to do that.
Right.
But like on the news, they'll still refer to a natural disaster as an act of God.
Right.
Stuff like that. So I still think that the
Certainly
label,
the insurance companies do too.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that the label is still useful as like a way of saying this is a thing that happened that we can't control and we didn't predict.
Right.
And like the forces of the universe and like the chaos that is us and the world. I still like think of that using the word God, but I don't think that it's an entity that has any kind of influence over my life other than it existing.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the world exists, the universe exists because it exists.
Yeah, basically.
There is no real reason,
No, I don't think
And
there
there's
needs to
no-
be either.
purpose to it. There's no objective to
Yeah.
existence, right?
And because there isn't, this is pretty Western and pretty individualistic, but I think that because there isn't any God or any reason to exist, we just get to find our own meaning for it.
Mm-hmm.
We get to like make whatever we want to out of it.
So what
Yeah.
in the absence of, and this actually comes down to sort of morality as well,
Yeah.
right? So why live in a society then if there's no meaning to it? What guides you in your behaviors towards other people?
I don't think that we have as much control over what we do as we think we do, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think that our brains were, like the way that our brains work and how we deal with other people
Uh-huh.
was developed by evolution.
Okay.
And it's much more beneficial to a creature to have more things that are helping it, because you don't have to do 100% of the work then.
Right.
So it's more beneficial for humans if we do like cooperate. And I
Okay.
think that that's like a huge basis of morality.
Awesome.
Like, there's a negative consequence to doing a bad thing.
Right.
But there are people, obviously, who don't care about that, and their brains don't value that for whatever reason, and largely anomalies.
Right.
And
What
that's the
would
thing, too.
I mean? Might that be attributable to upbringing, to
It can be.
sort of the
There's-
nature or the nurture environment?
It can be, but I do think it's also nature.
Okay.
So nature versus nurture, I don't think that it's a dichotomy. It's a relationship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Um,
that's great.
So it's pre-existing factors, and then how you're raised influences them.
Sure.
So like, as like a personal example, I might have like been born with a brain that was more predisposed to being anxious, but things in my life kind of confirmed for my brain that you should be scared. So
Right.
it's more alert.
So
than it
they
should
sort of
be. Yeah.
work together to synergize this anxious feeling so you sometimes get. Is
Yeah.
that the idea?
I wouldn't use the word sometimes. It's basically always.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, you don't seem very anxious right now.
You've only ever known me anxious.
Was that right?
yeah.
So I have no other way to. Okay.
Yeah. So
Right.
my leg is bouncing.
Yeah, well, that's true.
And I'm always fidgeting.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I've learned how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned how to project a comforting person that isn't constantly scared, but inside quite scared.
Have you ever tried meditation?
I do. I meditate every day.
Oh, good for you.
Because if I don't, I can't sleep.
Ah.
Yeah, so I walk myself through my entire day, and I like work through whatever I need to work through, and then I like just try to sit in the stillness, and then it's bedtime.
Mhm.
That's what I do every day, and if I don't, I generally have nightmares,
Oh, is that right?
or if I get to sleep at all. So,
Right. Your brain just keeps working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I'm anxious. I have panic attacks when I get really overwhelmed, and I also dissociate, which is weird. If you don't dissociate, it's really, really hard to explain.
Right.
So that's like when your brain gets scared and overwhelmed, and instead of being like, it just goes, cool, we'll sit in this and deal with it and not think about it at all.
Right.
And it's almost like you don't exist.
Right.
Uh-huh. So,
Like going into zombie mode.
mhm.
Yeah. Right.
So I've learned how to like be functional and like interact with people and just like put myself on like auto mode while I'm doing that. But like if I get stressed enough, I dissociate, and then like I'm not really in control super much of what I'm doing. I'm not making a lot of conscious decisions. I'm doing whatever needs to be done so I can go home so I can calm down.
Right.
Yeah.
What? So so coming back, I just wanted to unpack a little bit about your previous beliefs in
Yeah.
God or pagan gods, and then your transition out of that. What's in a couple of sentences, what happened? What was that about?
I was a child.
Okay.
And I wasn't raised very religiously, which I think is why it was easy for me to transition out of
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But I took people's word for it that there was a God because so many people believed in it.
Right.
And then I thought about it, and I read some books, and I watched some videos, and I thought about it. I was like, nothing proves that there is a God, and there's a lot of things that prove that even if there is a God, they don't do much. So, in effect, and as much as it affects me, there isn't one. It's basically the conclusion I came to.
Okay.
And then from there, I formed a system of beliefs that makes me feel better, which I think
Okay.
is the purpose of religion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, if the evidence pointed the other way, if all of a sudden there was a whole bunch of evidence that came in that demonstrated, to your satisfaction that, the possibility of a God existed, would you
Would I change my
adjust?
beliefs?
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
I'm not sure what could prove that there is a deity other than them actually coming to Earth.
Yeah.
And
And that's
interact.
usually the way it is, right? For
Yeah.
any belief.
It's like
Is
if
the
I-
reason we hold a belief is because there's no disconfirming information.
So a lot of people have experiences that they believe to be a confirmation of God.
Mhm.
So like feeling the Holy Spirit is one, or
Right.
like going to a place that has like a lot of reverence and then like feeling religiously. but that can be attributed to other factors.
Sure.
But they take that as a confirmation of there being a God, because that's
Right.
the belief that they already hold. And since I hold the belief that even if there is a God, they don't do much, and that it doesn't really matter, I think I'd still hold that belief even if I met God.
Okay.
Like, or any, like, deity. Because, like, if they govern the world, I already think that they govern the world, and I call them by that name. I just don't think that they're intelligent in doing anything. And if they prove to me that they were intelligent in doing anything, I have some criticisms. And it doesn't really change much.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's basically it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, your circle of friends.
Yes.
So, where are you situated in your belief spectrum in relation to your friends? Do you have religious friends,
I do have religious friends.
or are most of your friends agnostic or atheists?
I have atheist friends. I have a couple pagan friends.
Okay.
Because we found each other. I don't know how. There's like not very many pagan people. I think there's like statistically more in this town than like the wider population, but like yeah.
What leads you to say that?
I know that as far as like the statistics of the world are, paganism is like not even 1%, or it's attributed to other religions.
Okay.
And I know that there are covens, and I know quite a few people who practice some form of paganism. So
paganism is, in my understanding, is a pretty broad term.
Yeah.
Are you actually speaking maybe of Wicca, or?
I was Wiccan. That's
okay.
But I now use the broad term pagan because, yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
It's more comfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is it about the practices that you continue in the absence of being?
A lot of it's actually mindfulness.
Okay.
So yeah, it's like thinking, what do I want? How will I get it? Asking the universe for what you want. It's like burning prayers and like having a sense of reverence, or like there's Sabbats. There's 8 of them in a year. There's 4 fire festivals and 4 they're like lunar festivals. So like the solstice and the equinoxes, and then like the fire festivals are like stuff like
Samhain.
Yeah, Samhain.
Yeah.
Samhain. It has multiple pronunciations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on those days, certain things are supposed to happen. Like on Samhain, like it's a festival of death. It's also a festival of harvest. You think about your place in the world on that day. And like you're supposed to like think of your loved ones who are dead, or like think of morality and stuff. I still think that it's important to think of those things and set aside time to do that. So I still celebrate those practices. Or like.
But you don't attribute anything magical to them?
Yeah, not in the conventional sense of magic. Like
Okay. Like experientially,
Experientially,
they're
it feels
cool
good.
and
Yeah.
But you're not. It's not like there's an otherworldly sort of aspect that you're.
I don't think that the veil of death is closer than usual, because I don't believe that
Right.
the veil of death actually physically exists.
Okay.
But I do think that, like, metaphorically, the veil of death is like the experience that we get when we're close to death, and everything's dying. So experientially, the veil of death is closer. The crops are dying, the trees look bare. Statistically, more people get sick in the fall, which means that more people would die. So
Right, but the distinction is that you're not.
I don't think
And
that
correct
it
me if I'm
physically
wrong.
exists.
It's not a magical. You're not magic. It's not.
I don't
thinking
practice
magic. Right.
Yeah. Like I still do. I still cast runes and stuff sometimes.
No.
Which is supposed to be like an oracle to tell the future.
Right.
I use it as a technique more of like seeing where I'm at. Because like, okay, so each of the stones means something. You cast them and then you interpret them. And like based on which ones go in what order, you like can tell the future if you're good at it. But like,
Is that possible?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
So what I do is when I do it, or like when I cast the stones and I read them, something comes to mind when I read the stones. So
Okay.
I figure out which thing I care about because it's the first thing that pops in my head. So it's like that's the thing I'm going to focus on because that's what I care about right now.
Oh, okay.
So I use it as a tool for personal reflection instead of like trying to tell the future, which informs the future because it changes my behavior, but it like it isn't telling me anything that I don't already know.
So what's the purpose of
What's the
doing it?
purpose?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Oh, okay.
It's a tool to use to figure out what you believe and what you care about. It's just one more method instead of just like arbitrarily thinking. Being like, what do I care about? And then a thing pops up. So with this one, it's like, you're gonna be lucky today, and I think of what do I want to happen? What would be lucky in that day? And then like, oh, that's what I want to happen. Yeah. So it's fun, basically.
Yeah, I was just trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
But it and it's great that you're so clear on, I mean, what it does for you. I mean, there are certainly tons of people out there that cast runes with the actual belief that that they can portend the future.
I think that even like kind of like Schrodinger's cat, casting the rune sets a future.
Okay.
Because like the runes inform your decision. So for them it might tell the future, but it tells them what to do. Kinda.
And for you,
And for me it does the same thing, except I actually know that it doesn't like actually mean anything about the fate of me. It's just like what am I going to do? Like I still hold like the I really can't think of the word. Like I'm still the one in control. Autonomy?
Right.
Yeah, I'm
right.
still autonomous.
Right.
Of, like fate.
There is no fate. Sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to put that in your. I didn't mean to say that
Yeah.
was the case, but
I don't think that for any intents and purposes that actually matter, fate exists.
okay.
But I do believe in the multiverse theory. Which
Okay.
is that like every little tiny thing creates a new universe, and like having something happen or having a lack of something happen, new universe. There's a billion, million, quadrillion possibilities of anything that could happen. I'm not sure if they physically exist, and I'm not really sure if it matters, but I definitely subscribe to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's actually become pretty popular, this
Yeah.
idea of a multiverse, sort of as an explanation for the fine-tuning argument,
Yeah.
right? Are you familiar with that?
A little bit.
Okay, well, the fine-tuning argument is that the constants that, the universe seems to operate under, if they were off by just a little bit, there's no way that life could exist. And that becomes an apologist's argument to support their belief in a God. Whereas, the rebuttal is, in a multiverse, it's bound to happen.
And like our current understanding of the universe is that it's infinite and expanding. So of course, like somewhere in the line of infinite, there would be a person.
Yeah, I'm not sure that
Or the current understanding that's taught in school is that the universe
is
infinite.
that it's infinite.
Yeah, that's
but it
the
was-
word that they use to describe the universe.
Is that right, eh?
Yeah.
Because if it had a beginning, 13.7 billion years ago, how could it be infinite?
How do you know that there isn't something before?
No, but
Exactly.
then
Could
that's,
be infinite.
but then it's not our universe,
I guess, yeah.
right?
But if it's all the
I mean that's
if
an
it's all the
argument.
same-
Right?
If it's all the same matter that came down to a pinprick and then exploded in the Big Bang, isn't it the same like matter?
But if time and space didn't exist prior to the Big Bang, there's nothing in which matter
There's
can
actually
exist.
like a philosophical thing that I have been thinking about that applies to this. The one where it's like, if you have a boat and you slowly replace all the pieces, but you keep the pieces and you put it back together again after, which one's the real boat? Which one's the real boat? If we had all the pieces that made up our universe and then it exploded into a new one, which one's the real boat? Because it exploded and then you put it back together.
Sort of like one of these repeating universes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like entropy.
Right.
Yeah. That's how it be, I think.
Well, that's not the same as a multiverse.
So I think that there's a lot of repeating universes.
Okay, so okay. Well, that's a whole new cosmology there.
Yeah.
So a repeating multiverse.
Just like the possibility for anything.
Right. Of course, that doesn't have too many practical applications for us, eh?
No, it's just really fun to believe.
Right, right.
Like at some point, I don't think that we need to take our beliefs super seriously. Like you can believe something because it's fun or because you want to.
Right.
It doesn't need to be true. But it's
Okay.
much better for interacting with other people if you can at least back it up.
Right. Well, maybe that makes it for an interesting question is, do we choose our beliefs?
That is interesting because it calls into question, like, whether or not it's possible to choose your own actions and like your own personal autonomy. I guess everything, like, yeah, I'm not sure if we choose our beliefs because our beliefs are kind of given to us and then we do with that what we will. So how we're raised and how we occur, like our brains, how you're born, like they kind of influence what you would do with like,
Right.
information.
Sure.
So I don't think it's like up to us to personally personally choose everything we believe in, but I do think that there is some amount of choice in whether or not we like continue believing something.
Right. Well, for instance, there was a point in time where you believed in a god or in pagan gods or whatever deities, but you didn't wake up one morning and say, you know what, it's all hogwash.
Yeah, and people who
It was something that happened over
burned.
time. Is that right?
Yeah,
What?
people who did were burned.
What do you mean?
People who were like, yeah, you know what? I don't think God actually exists. Someone who wakes up one day and actually starts talking about it, they would be punished by the church or like by the public at mass.
Right.
So
But
even if they did, they didn't talk about it. So there isn't any proof of whether or not that happened.
right. I guess more what I'm trying to say is
Yeah,
that
it's
there's a slower
thing.
transition. Just my experience of it, and I'm just trying to see if that's yours as well. Because did you wake up one day and say, God is
Yeah.
clearly God doesn't exist, or was it something that happened
quite
over
gradually.
quite gradually?
Yeah. So I wasn't raised super religiously.
Right. You were saying, yeah.
So I wasn't told that God exists. My grandma raised me quite atheistically, but she
Okay.
herself is pagan. So
Okay.
a lot of the language around how you would talk about a thing like a god, comfortably to me, is to talk about it through the lens of paganism,
Okay.
because that's how I was raised, even though it wasn't a huge focus. So part of the reason why I still practice is because it's kind of cultural and personal, or it's a thing that my family does. But I don't believe in it in any real way, because she's also basically an atheist now.
Okay.
So yeah, my experience of going from believing in a deity that actually exists to not is I read a couple books because I wanted to be more pagan basically.
Okay.
And I was trying to be better at it, and then I was reading books on how to do that, and I was like, that seems like hogwash. So then I
Right.
started listening to other people who believe in that, and I'm like, that also sounds fake to me. So I started watching atheist YouTubers, and I found one guy who's talking quite a bit about some of the contradictions of if God exists, then this, and he was explaining and breaking down apologists'
Okay. Who?
arguments. His name's Mr. Atheist on YouTube.
Oh, Mr. Atheist. Okay.
Yeah, so I didn't disagree with it. And then I was thinking about it. And
Right.
I didn't want to give up the stuff I was already doing because I didn't really think it matters whether or not I believe it if I practice it.
Right.
It
Right.
still has the benefit without me actually believing it.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's an appeal to the practices that don't necessarily have to have the belief behind them to support them.
So in cultures that are very, very religious, a lot of their cultural practices are very worked up into religion. So being completely atheist in that social environment
Right.
would be to kind of give up a huge piece of your culture.
Right.
So I don't think that to be an atheist person you have to not practice. like a lot of atheists celebrate Christmas,
Of course.
which is a pagan holiday.
Of course, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them are. Most of the holidays are
Really
around
are.
pagan. Yeah.
Like Easter lines up pretty close with the beginning of spring.
Yeah. They call it exacting. It's rather than adapting, they exact. So they take something that worked in the past and repurpose it for their own uses.
So my understanding is that the Christians, to assimilate pagans easier,
Yeah.
because paganism existed first,
Yep.
they're like, hey, what if we made all of our festivals around where pagans already practice, so they can just call it a different thing?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the voodoo, all that religion is wrapped in Catholic symbolism,
Yeah.
but is still rooted very much in their traditional beliefs. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by like other people's beliefs and like how people come to different conclusions. Because I'm personally very left wing, so I think a lot about how someone who is very right wing would get to their conclusions, because it just seems so. I don't even know how you would think that, but
Right.
I've come to understand that they have like a different base assumption about the world.
Right.
So, like, to hear the statement "everyone is equal," they might do something different with that than someone who's much more on the left would do. So
Right.
everyone is equal to a leftist generally means everyone is equal, so we all deserve equal things. But my current understanding of what people like who are on the far-ish right believe is that like there's only so much to go around. So everyone's equal means that everyone gets to be on the same playing field to like compete for it. So like there's a hierarchy, and people who deserve it the most get the most because everyone's equal.
Right.
Which I don't agree with, but I can understand more why someone would get to the belief that they would, even though I disagree. And I do think about that.
When so in terms of in trying to develop a method, or having come up with a method to sort of reliably determine what is true from what is not true, what do you see as your role in sort of sharing that methodology or that understanding with other people?
Because I'm so fascinated by what other people believe, we basically just talk through it. Like, oh, that's what you mean when you say those words, because this is what I interpret it as.
Right.
And just working through it. And generally I find that people fall more in the middle than the words that they say mean. Like once you actually like work through what they really mean when they say it. Because words are kind of a shortcut for a lot more other things. So yeah, you just kind of have to be patient and talk through it.
Right. So you find that it takes developing some common language in order to help people unpack what they actually mean by the things they say, which may at sometimes be extreme.
Yeah. So yeah, that's basically it.
Okay.
That you have to like find common, like a way of talking about what you both mean using the same words.
Right.
Because people on different sides of an argument mean different things when they say different things.
Sure.
Or like when they say the same thing, it can mean something different.
For sure.
Like,
And
just
for example,
calling someone a banker means a banker,
right.
or it means the Jewish conspiracy. It can be both,
Right.
and they're saying the same word.
Right.
So,
That's what I was going to get to. Yeah.
basically, like. they
Or
mean
even the
something
terms
different.
left and right.
Yeah.
Like, not everyone who's familiar with that spectrum politically appreciates that the one means this and the other means that. So.
And like, if you use a different metric to like measure who's where, you can get to different results.
Right.
And people who are like further right than others will like go ahead and call like people who are like less right wing than they are leftists.
Right.
And like, no, they're not.
So how do we get away from that? How
do we get away with that?
how do we get away from that? How do we clarify the language so that you don't come away from a conversation saying, well, they've come a little more to the left? Is there a way to sort
Science is a good common language.
of? Okay.
but the person would have to believe what you do about science. Like, there's only so much you can really do. I'm not sure if there is a way to completely bridge that gap, because like, I think human brains are quite tribalistic in the way that they're designed.
Very interesting. Yes, that's. Thank you. That's a great thing to say. What makes you believe that? What makes you think that?
How comforting it is to find a group that you belong to.
Okay.
Like, it's so comforting.
It is.
If you feel like an outsider and you find a group that's also an outsider, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a group.
Yeah. And now you're an insider to the outsider group.
Yeah.
Right.
So we like to give ourselves these labels because it makes things way easier to talk about, and it also is a way to find people who you agree with and who would like get along with because they share common interests or like common like factors of their life.
Right.
So I think that like it's an innate thing that humans do, and even people who don't, the antisocial people, they have their own groups.
Of course.
So, yeah.
Is that a thing? Is that a good thing, or is it something that maybe evolution we should look forward to evolution kind of?
I don't think it can be given a value judgment.
Right.
Because it does good and bad things.
Right.
And that isn't objective, but that is my belief.
Mm-hmm.
That like there's sometimes that it's good to have a community because like there's someone to there's like group to rally around you and you find support.
Right.
But sometimes having a community, especially like a very very specific community, can lead you to like false beliefs because you aren't being exposed to other perspectives.
Right.
And you aren't examining what you believe.
Right. Yeah, because you've got no context to it, right?
Yeah. So you're like, oh, everyone's saying this is true. All the evidence I'm exposed to say this is true.
Right.
And that's actually another reason why I think that therapy is really valuable. Because if you're in your own head, you're having a lot of thoughts, and you come to your own conclusions, and you're only seeing your evidence through the context of your own brain, you come to conclusions and you don't question them. Because like, that makes complete sense.
Right, right.
But if you're talking to someone who has like a different understanding or who is more objective, then that is like a way to work through what you like actually believe and what you believe underneath the things that you say are true. And I think the same thing can apply to politics and stuff. Which is like they're not necessarily that people are like in the middle. I'm not sure if like the person to like be the mediator is the person in the middle. But I think that like just having a perspective when you're talking to someone where you aren't immediately trying to put a value judgment on them,
Right.
is beneficial for like coming to an understanding.
Sure. Right. So.
I lost my place while I was talking about that.
And that's
Yeah.
all right. I mean, it's not like there's a real goal or objective to having this conversation, other than trying
Have
to
the conversation.
having the conversation. Yeah, exactly. But I find a lot of what you're saying very refreshing, and it's so great to know that there are young people out there. I mean, there's a lot of times that I hear people around my age saying, "Oh, the young people today, they don't know what's going on."
I hear a
But
lot.
clearly,
Yeah.
you're an example that there's a lot of
care
hope
a
for the
lot.
future. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's great, right? And despite sort of the pitfalls and the shortcomings that we feel we have, and youth, that you're pulling through it. I mean, you're tapping your foot, but you're sitting here having a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So despite whatever anxiety you're feeling, it seems to me that you're fairly comfortable having a conversation with me. So
I like conversations.
Yeah, right
I
on.
like talking through what I think because it like leads me to like I don't know. I think it's really hard to have a conversation with yourself because
Sure.
you don't question yourself.
right,
So like even when I am
it's an echo chamber, right?
yeah, even when I am talking to myself in my own little skull, it's just like bouncing around in there.
Right.
But when you talk to someone else, you have to explain what you really mean
Right,
instead of just using the shorthand that you've developed in your own brain to mean things.
right. And it's harder to assume that people know what you mean right off the bat.
Like having to set terms
Right,
when you're talking to other people.
right. And come to common agreement on what those terms are, right?
So that's another piece of knowledge being power, actually. Is
Okay.
that like the more you understand about what someone else believes, the easier it is to predict what they're going to do.
Okay.
That's why I think it's important to have these kind of conversations.
So, what is power? Like, what do you
Power.
mean when you say
Okay.
knowledge is power?
Um,
Just let me have a look here at the time. I don't want to keep you too long.
I'm free until I have to help a friend with homework tonight, but other than that,
Okay.
I'm left today free.
Wow.
And my own homework, but that'll come in its own due time.
Right, right. Well, you've got an
so-
A plus to work on, right?
I'm getting 90s in all my classes.
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I just meant about that paper you're working
Yes,
on. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. So power and what
Yes.
that means.
Yeah.
I think that the common understanding of what power is the ability to change things, or like to sway people, or to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So, based on that, knowledge is power means that with more knowledge you can do more.
Okay.
But power can also mean how much force you can exert, which can have the same effect, so that
Okay.
you're forcing someone to do something. But
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you use the word force. So force is.
force has some negative connotations.
Well, it does have
Yeah.
sort of an aggressive sort of tone to it. Is that what you mean?
Kind of. I
Okay.
have more than healthy distrust of authority.
Okay.
So, I know that authority has power,
Okay.
and with that power, you can force people to do things.
Right.
By like giving them no other choice, or like just narrowing down what you allow them to do while still being okay and healthy. Yeah.
Would there be a difference in your mind between exerting power and exerting influence?
Yeah.
Okay. What would you see the difference as?
Influence is two-way.
Okay.
You can be influenced, but if you're a powerful person, someone who isn't powerful likely doesn't have much of an effect.
Doesn't
'Cause
have
they're-
much of an influence.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, like, this isn't like objective. It isn't across the board.
Okay. No,
But,
we're just talking terms here. Yeah.
But in general, like, let's say that money is power.
Okay.
So someone with a lot of money can't be as affected as someone who has very little money, because they can't buy the things, they can't use the money, and the money is the thing that's the power. But influence, they can be influenced by the fact, someone with a lot of money can be influenced by the fact that someone has little money and give up some of their money and like distribute the power. And I think that that's kind of like intellectual influence as well, just
Okay.
like someone who thinks a lot about something and someone who doesn't, or like someone who has like different like values or like amounts of different beliefs can share those beliefs. Somewhat like
Okay.
influence is more passive and power is more like hierarchical.
Right. If a person, I mean, if taking your example here about money, is money itself power, or is it a tool of power?
It's in our common capitalist Western world, money is so synonymous with power that it's not super meaningful to like separate them, I don't think. But I don't
Okay.
think that money itself is powerful.
Okay.
I
Because
think the use of money is powerful.
Okay. Yeah. For instance, if a person won a lottery, who was raised and lived 35 years as a poor person, and all of a sudden they won $5 million, are they a powerful person now?
They're more powerful than they were. They have
Okay.
more of an ability to exert force on other things. They can buy stuff. They can change people's lives. But they aren't. They're still them. So they still have like the sphere of influence that they had before, which is middle class or like lower middle class people, or even like if we're using the class system, obviously, like poor people. Like, that's still who they generally talk to, and
Right.
someone who's really rich isn't going to be like, oh, you have $5 million, come into my house. So it
Right.
doesn't change that much about the hierarchy of power, but it does give them more of the ability to do things.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we're not, again,
We might be
totally
using
clear on what
different
power
words.
is, right?
Yeah. Power means more than one thing. is what
Right.
I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
just like experiential versus objective.
Sure.
That like you can do the kind of power, or you can have the kind of power that changes things, or you can have the kind of power that forces things. And the force, I think, is hierarchical. Kind of, in the way that it's like organized.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the other one is.
And the other one is less that. Because it can go both ways.
Here I'm just goofing off now.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting because again, I was trying to, for myself, figure out, like when you said that money is power, that maybe the definition of power shifted a little bit from what you had originally meant.
I guess, yeah. Because
Because
Well, no,
knowledge
it
is
kind of does mean
because you
the
said
same thing.
knowledge is power, right?
knowledge is power because it allows you to change things to like a better degree.
Right.
Money is power because it allows you to navigate the world easier.
Okay.
Knowledge is power because it allows you to navigate
But they're
the world
definitely
easier.
two different kinds of things,
They're two
right?
different kinds of power.
Gotcha.
Because you get knowledge
Yeah.
way differently than you get money.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So there, right there, we've sort of figured out that very easily and very quickly we can lose sight of what we're talking about when we change the definition of the terms that we're using to describe the things that we're talking about,
Yeah.
like power.
And because of like the different connotations of things talking about like education versus talking about wealth,
Right.
the words do mean different things when
Right.
you're talking about them in relationship to power. Because knowledge, a lot of the time when we're talking about knowledge, we're trying to be more objective and like it's seen as like more of a level playing field, and that anyone who wants knowledge can pretty much get it. But talking about money, it's like because it's so synonymous in our society with powerful people, and powerful people in general have been like exerting their power on keeping other people oppressed. Like it has a different way of talking about it. Because yeah, I don't know. I'm thinking about like misogyny and like racism and stuff like that with money, as opposed to knowledge and like education, because there is like misogyny in education. It's like less now, but there has a long history of like
Sure.
completely denouncing women's opinions, or if they do come up with discoveries, like men take the credit for it,
Yeah.
or not allowing women to practice being scholars.
Yeah. You ever seen the movie there with Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
That's a name. I don't know. Do you know the name?
She was one of the first women appointed to the Supreme Court. There's a
Uh,
couple of movies that have been
yeah.
shown recently with her. An amazing woman, but again, she
Yeah.
was being judged on the basis of her sex, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that the thing that changes when we talk about like knowledge versus money is the like nature of what can be done with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So are both essentially sort of tools then? So knowledge is a tool to exert power or influence, and money is a tool
To exert power and influence.
exert or influence.
The way I personally think about power is about how you choose what to do.
Ah,
Yeah. So knowledge is power because you can make a better choice.
okay.
Money is power because you can choose to do more things, and you can choose which one of those things you want to do based off of like a wider selection. If you have less money, you can't choose to buy the more healthy, expensive food.
Right.
You have to choose what you can have. If you have more knowledge, you can know that the better food is better for you, but you don't have enough money to buy it. And I think that knowledge is more voluntary. So,
More voluntary?
more voluntary.
Okay.
There's things all around us that give us knowledge. So like I can see that you might call that blue. I'm more artistic, so I'd call it cyan. I have more knowledge about the color. And I can like observe things around the room and like around like the world. I can constantly have more knowledge. There isn't a pile of cash that I can just have more of all the time.
Right.
So, yeah, that's another thing that changes about whether or not, or like changes the discussion between knowledge and power and cash and power.
So in accumulating knowledge, is that a choice, or is that
Somewhat, yeah.
Okay.
Like
So
you
we're
passively accumulate knowledge all the time,
mm-hmm.
but you can choose to look for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So thinking about this, we have two ideas here that knowledge is power and money is power. They're different in the sense that they're tools that work towards accomplishing different things. So where's the seat of power?
The seat of power. I think the seat of power is an agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a human,
Yeah.
being an agent, then.
Being able to do what you want.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, and
That's the
making
most
and making
powerful thing.
decisions about that, right?
The most powerful thing you can do is to do whatever you want all the time.
Okay, and of course, what you want to do is based on
Your own feelings and bias and like
And
goals in
beliefs?
life. Yeah, and beliefs.
and belief. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Both things are then an agent of having more agency.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to sort of wind up.
All right. I forgot about the cameras.
Well, and that's kind of half the point, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of they're unobtrusive. I know the mic's a little more, right there, but
Mine looks furry. It's funny.
it's a windsock.
windbreaker,
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
windsock. So.
Make it not sound like we're blowing on the mic.
Well, see, I've held a couple outside,
Mm-hmm.
and you get the little gusts and it makes a whole bunch of noise. But yeah, so I got that on, and I just don't take it off because it looks cool.
Yeah.
But so, what did you think?
This was fun.
Yeah.
I like. You're right about some young people not having these kind of conversations. Like my peers and I don't have a lot of these kind of conversations. I have some friends that do. Like one of the girls that comes to the youth and philanthropy.
Okay.
She is one of my friends who will have these kind of conversations.
Which one? The
Camera.
blonde one?
Yes.
Okay.
The one who's much better at dates and names than I am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not that.
That's cool, and it's cool you didn't mention her name, but because there's the blonde girl and the brunette girl, so you're talking about the blonde girl.
Yeah, no, not the one that comes regularly. The one that comes very irregular and,
Oh,
and has her
okay.
own car. She's the one that I talk
Oh.
to. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Um,
Well, maybe you can ask her if she'd be interested in having a chat over coffee.
I'll ask her.
Yeah.
She's super busy though. She's
Yeah.
really, really dedicated to school.
Yeah.
So-
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I-
Well, I mean, again, and I'm just finding this so interesting because, I did sit down with Ethan, and we did one of these, and I think it's, I think it's so critical that, we get a better sense of where young people are coming from. You know what I mean? I mean, it's easy to have conversations with people who are, in their 40s or, coming up to my age, because they've got a whole bunch of lived experience that have helped them sort of root in where they're at. And it's so great to be in the company of young people, like hanging out with the Youth and Philanthropy group, just to know that,
Yeah.
young people out there are actually,
They
they
care.
care.
They
and
wanna do things,
and they're
they aren't
smart,
like-
and they're,
yeah.
and they want to figure things out, and they want to be a part of the scene, right?
Yeah.
So,
A big part of why young people don't talk more is because that a lot of the time when we do talk, we're told that our opinion doesn't matter because we don't
Right.
have enough experience.
right.
Or we're not allowed to make our own decisions about basically anything.
Right.
Like your parents make a lot of decisions for you, and the
Sure.
school makes a lot of decisions for you, and you have not a lot that you can do. So we're basically told a lot of the time that even if we do have opinions, it doesn't matter.
Right.
We can't do anything.
Your lack of autonomy in a lot of your life
Yeah.
seems to reinforce the fact that adults don't think
Yeah.
you should count or you should have an opinion.
So if it doesn't matter anyway, why would you put that much energy into forming opinions?
Right. right.
I was put in a bit of a different position though, because I started working when I was quite young. I don't know. There's different factors in my life that made me quite a bit more autonomous. Like I had my own money. I had things to do in my life. And I also like stopped listening. Like I still a lot of the time do what adults told me to. I just not necessarily do it blindly.
Right.
And that was the thing that was reinforced. So that led me to having more like independent thought.
Yeah. Cool.
I had to do my own thinking for myself.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, clearly you've done quite well on it, so that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming out. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah. And, like I said, we're going to try and form up this Skeptics in the Pub thing, but have maybe once a month over the library there. So, if you'd like to come out and tell folks about it as we form it up.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Okay, cool.
Shidooby boo boo boo, it's been chats over coffee. Oh.